Welcome back. This video is going to walk you through some ideas from a book that I wrote a few years ago called Theories of Truth and Introduction. And you can find it on Amazon. And it's a book which not only introduces theories of truth, but offers an extended argument towards the conclusion that the correspondence theory of truth is the most reasonable way that philosophers should think about truth. So this video is going to walk you through some of the ideas from that book, and hopefully offer at least an introduction to thinking about truth and trying to realize that truth is really simple. It's not one of these complicated esoteric metaphysical things that requires a great deal of speculation. So when I was preparing to write this book, I often read philosophers from different schools of philosophy who would say things like truths, for example, like consider the proposition, my keys are on my desk. That seems like a pretty obvious statement, and the truth of which seems fairly easy to figure out. But I would hear philosophers say things like those kinds of claims are trivial or obvious and just uninformative in developing a robust account of truth. And so this didn't seem quite right to me. So my question is, why not just begin with the data of common sense experience of truth and develop an account of truth from there? In other words, I take sort of Roderick Chisholm's view about knowledge and his problem of the criterion, that when we look at the options for what truth is, the main way that we come to an account of what truth is from our direct experience of it. So we experience truth, and therefore that's what allows us to know what it is. And then give a metaphysical account of it from our direct experience of it. So I take truth to be something that everyone can experience, that it's an obvious feature of reality, that it's not a mysterious kind of thing, or anything that's spooky or enigmatic. I think there's a book a few years back called Truth and Other Enigmas by Michael Dumay, I think is how you pronounce his last name. Dummett, maybe, I'm not quite sure on the pronunciation, but truth, in my view, is not enigmatic at all. It's just an obvious feature of how things are. So the book kind of offers a guided tour through, a museum, right? So you go to a museum, maybe it's the Louvre or somewhere, Getty Museum here in California, and you look at it's more narrow, I think, in terms of its its collections, but the Louvre, say, or any great museum that covers various periods of art, you might look at different wings of each part, and it's not going to be exhaustive. And so the book, my book, Theories of Truth and Introduction, isn't exhaustive. It's just an account of the collections of the views that are there. So even though I wrote this book with a particular defense, I am opinionated about what my view of truth is. I have a view of truth, and just like a tour guide through an art museum might prefer Michelangelo over Pollock or something like that, so too I think the correspondence view is more reasonable than the alternatives of, say, pragmatism or coherentism. So I believe that some claims about truth are actually true and others are actually false. And I think it's possible that maybe my own claims about truth could be false as well. So I think hopefully I'm not avoiding any possible self-referential concerns. So in the first chapter of the book, which I think I'll start with today, I give an overview of a common sense notion of truth, a brief defense of common sense notion of truth, and argue that truth is neither physical nor linguistic. So I think that's going to be super important. lot of philosophers, especially those steeped in the 20th century analytic philosophy, often seem to think that language is an essential component of truth, and I deny that. I don't think that's right. I think we use language, but we can have truth without language. In fact, I think truth is primarily a relation between the intellect and reality, and language doesn't enter into that relation. It can indirectly, but it doesn't directly. So one of the reasons that motivated me to write this book is as a teacher of undergraduate philosophy students. I think I'm starting in my 29th year of teaching undergrads. So you get a lot of time doing this sort of thing. And one of the things that you notice, I've noticed, starting with Gen X in the 90s, the latter end of Gen X were students that I had in the 90s when I started teaching philosophy, and now at the tail end, or almost maybe midway through Gen Z, the Brits say Gen Z, as Americans should say. I don't know if I'm going to make it to Gen Alpha, but Gen Z Gen X and the Millennials, all of them, and Gen Z as well. Though maybe certain segments of them might prove me wrong about this. We'll see how things end up over the next few years until the Gen Alphas start pouring into the universities. But one of the first tasks of teaching any philosophy class, in my experience, is to show my students that truth is not relativistic. So I take it as a personal mission to try and dismantle relativism in all my classes, and I've been doing that for almost 30 years now. I've written about relativism in several books. My dissertation was part of that, on McIntyre, Putnam, and Rorty, relativistic views and their approaches to philosophy. And then I have a separate book, also with that was with Continuum Press, called Relativism: A Guide for the Perplexed. So if you're interested in relativism about truth, I'm not going to spend much time with that here, maybe a little bit, but if you want a further book-length treatment of contemporary views of relativism from the late 20th century, and then just a general critique of relativism across the disciplines of philosophy, you can check out those two books. They're on Amazon as well. But I think it's incredibly important for philosophers to develop an account of truth that is non-relativistic. So even among non-relativistic views of truth, there's a wide variety of them. Generally, philosophers think that coherentism and pragmatism are non-relativistic. They may debate over whether or not they devolve into relativism, but the correspondence approach to truth, there's varieties of correspondence views. There's not just one univocal approach, but all of them are non-relativistic in my view. And so I think any defense of truth has to be non-relativistic. I think it's only possible. So my hope is that in these videos on truth, you will come to know that there's truth about truth, and find that helpful to your life. So let me start in this first video with saying that we'll get into the meat of the first chapter of the book here, is that truth is simple. So truth is not enigmatic. So let's just take a case, right? Since I take cases of truth to be the place where we should begin, let's just take a truth. Suppose I reach for my keys in my backpack, my pocket. I'm getting ready to leave in the morning or go home from work, and I reach for my keys in my pocket or my backpack, and they're not there. Like, oh no, what did I do with my car keys? Assuming you don't have a car that can be opened with your phone, but there was a time when you had to have your keys. to open your car. So suppose I reach for my keys and I can't find them. So I form a belief in my mind about where my keys are. And my belief is that my keys are on my desk back in my office. So I walk back to my office from the parking lot and, have to, the only way to get into my office is to call campus security to have them let me in for the third time this semester because I keep forgetting my keys. And I look on my desk. I just engage in an act of visual perception, and I look and I see my keys. There they are, sitting on the desk. And I grab them off the desk and put them back in my pocket and mumble my apologies to the security guard and call home, let my wife know that I'll be running late again because I left my keys on my desk and had to walk all the way from the parking lot back to the office and back to the lot, and I'm going to be 20 minutes late. So, since I'm in a rush to get home, I'm not in a particularly philosophical mood, but something just extraordinary that's just occurred in a case like this. This is a profound experience. It's mundane in that it occurs all the time, but it is profound, and its profundity is best explained in this way. I just experienced truth. I'm going to say that again. I just experienced truth. And truth was immediately present in my experience. In other words, you too experience truth all the time. It's not something mysterious. And here's how it works. You form a belief in your mind about something in reality. And you go and you look at reality. And you see the match between your belief and reality. Then you've experienced truth. That's it. Super simple. Recognizing this experience of truth is neither to maintain that truth is nothing more than an individual experience. It certainly isn't that. Nor is it to deny that truth is independent from an individual experience. It's simply to say that truth can be understood from our common sense experiences. Truth is simple. Truth is fully present in our experiences. We can know truth, and we can know what it is, and we can give a clear description of it. And this is a really simple and easy place to begin our inquiry about truth. Okay, so let me shift gears here a little bit and say something about maybe a slightly more philosophical analysis of the kind of experience that I just described of finding my keys on my desk. Suppose that I'm not in a rush to get home, which rarely happens. I usually like being home. Suppose I were to engage and reflect philosophically on what just happened when I form a belief about where my keys are, and then I visually see where my keys are, and I see that my belief matches that reality. C.S. Peirce calls this ideoscopy or phaneroscopy, or some philosophers call it phenomenology. Now, I'm not saying the kind of phenomenology that detaches us from how things are, not an idealistic phenomenology that runs through Kant, a realist phenomenology, an account of the experience, what it's like to experience something. So suppose we pay close attention to what goes on in our own experiences. By looking at our experience of truth, the match between our minds and reality, we can glean insight into truth. When we pay attention to our experiences, it allows us to give a full account of what truth is, or at least the best we can do given our experiences. It's this simple experience of finding the world as we thought it to be. That's what truth is. An account of truth is going to be an account of our finding the world as we thought it to be. So if I think, for example, that there's a purple cup on this table in front of me, and I form a belief there's a purple cup on the table, and then I look over here and I see this purple cup, then my belief is true because it matches reality. Now, when I think about what it is to have the belief, what it is for the object to have its qualities, and what it is for my mind, my mental state to match the qualities of the object, that's when I'm doing a philosophy of truth. So this finding of the world as we thought it to be, in these kinds of cases, we want to know the characteristics of the experience of seeing the keys on the desk match directly our beliefs that the keys are on the desk. So when it comes to analyzing these everyday experiences of experiencing truth, there are at least four primary parts to that experience. First, there's our own self, right? Our mental states, our mental lives, who have beliefs. We have beliefs and experiences. Second, we have beliefs that are about where the car keys are. So there's the person experienced truth. There's the beliefs that we have, or the ideas in our mind, thoughts we have. We can equivocate between belief, thought, representation, something like that. Those, my own views, those are all different, distinct. Right now, we'll just call it a belief, because in the case of my keys, in that example, I formed a belief. I had a mental representation of how reality is thought to be, and I use that belief as a source of action. And I take that belief as something like a springboard to action that distinguishes it from a mere thought or mere representation. So first, we have the person who experiences truth. Second, there's the belief or the mental state that's about the way things are thought to be. And third, there's a sensory experience of seeing our keys on the desk. So there's the experience itself, the visual perception, the act of perception, if you want to put it that way. And then fourthly, we have an empirical experience of seeing that my sensory experience of the keys on my desk matches the belief that the keys are on the desk. And that's a different experience than the experience of the perception of the keys on the desk. Okay, so that might be a little hard to follow there. But it's one thing to experience an object in an act of perception. Like when I see this object, I'm perceiving it, and I can talk about that experience. But there's a second experience that goes on in a case of truth, because in a case of truth, if I believe or think or represent reality as having a table with a purple mug on it, and then I look at the world and I see the purple mug, then in that case, I have two experiences. I have the experience of perceptual act of seeing the purple mug, or purple glass. It's not glass, plastic. The purple plastic mug, cup, and then I have the act of being aware of the fulfillment or the correspondence of my belief that there's a purple cup on the table with the perception itself, and that's a separate action. Okay, so given these four things, these serve as the primary objects of our study for an analysis of our experience of truth. Okay, so this is going to run all through the book, and I'll try and make this a little clearer as we go on with some clear cases, and talk about exactly how these relationships work themselves out philosophically. Okay, let me touch on maybe one or two more. Actually, you know what? I think I'll need a separate video for this, because I want to talk a little bit about how truth is not physical and how truth is not linguistic. Okay, so I want to get that out of the way at the beginning of this series on truth, because if truth is linguistic or physical, there's no possible way to explain the kinds of experiences that we have when we experience truth in the way that I've just described it, as an act of the mind, representing things as they are, with the qualities of the object being present before the mind, and the relation of correspondence occurring between object and mind. Okay, so if truth is linguistic or if truth is physical, I think we're going to have a really hard time explaining that phenomena of truth that we experience all the time when we find the world as we think it to be. And so I'm going to offer some arguments against those in some separate videos. But for now, let me just conclude with this thought. Truth is simple. It's not enigmatic. And secondly, we experience it all the time, right? You form a belief about how things are. You lose your keys. You lose your phone. You misplace an object. You form a belief or a thought or a representation in your mind about where that object is, and then you go and you look in reality to see and to perceive that object. And when you perceive that object as you had thought it to be, then you've got the truth. Then your mind and reality are isomorphically related in such a way that they correspond to each other. And that's what's called the correspondence theory of truth. And it's quite simple in terms of experiencing it. Now, it's a little more complex metaphysically to describe the features of that experience, but the fact that we experience truth all the time should be the kind of thing that should be so obvious to everyone that you don't have to be any sort of like super intellectual person to figure out what truth is. It's super simple. Kids know what truth is, right? Little kids. You don't have to. This is pointed out in a really nice little paper by Dallas Willard called "Truth Can We Do Without It." It's on his website dwillard.org, and it's just a nice little lecture on truth. But one of the things he mentions there is that the truth is so simple. You don't have to teach children how to lie, right? Because we know what truth is, and we know how to manipulate it to distort it. So yeah, just think about that. And then next time, the next couple of videos, I'll walk you through why truth is not linguistic and why truth is not physical. And once we get done with that, then I'll give you maybe a brief history of truth in Western philosophy. And then from there, we'll go on to some other topics on defending a robust correspondence. Thanks for watching.
Stay psyched, Grom. You.